2/3 of AI projects fail not because of the technology, but what we discussed. So quote unquote bad data. And so what does the failure actually look like in practice then for a lot of these organizations?
Eventually, it means bad decisions, and bad decisions can cost you a lot of data.
When you were looking back at when you were building your first company and that entire scope, which part of that actually felt like it was never quite right?
Making sure you have valid data, because like that's so critical. I mean, you can have like the biggest amount of data. If people do not trust the data, it's all for nothing. The outcome can only be as good as the input is, right?
Data is the foundation of every smart business decision in e-commerce, but most companies are sitting on a mountain of it without knowing how to turn it into action or profit. Today's guest is Andreas Fischer, CEO of Minubo, which received the Jury Grand Choice Award at the E-commerce Germany Awards. Prior to this role, he co-founded MODOMOTO, a personal shopping service he scaled to over 250 employees, and it was there that he ran headfirst into the messy reality of e-commerce data. That frustration never left him, and Minubo became his answer to it. A platform that helps e-commerce brands cut through the data chaos to grow more profitably. In this episode, we get into why 2/3 of AI projects fail before they even start, what it really means to be data-driven versus just data-rich, and how to build the foundation your business needs before AI can do anything useful for you. Welcome to Behind the Click, powered by e-commerce Berlin Expo. I'm your host, Janine Heinrich, and let's get into this episode. Welcome to the podcast, Andreas. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I also wanted to say congratulations on your recent award from the E-commerce Germany Awards. How was that for you? What did that mean for your team?
Yeah, thank you. Of course, it was a great honor for the team. I mean, especially I think it's always great for the team. They work so hard, and to see that recognized by such a wide audience and winning that award, that's always it makes a lot of happy faces when I return to the company.
I'm completely sure. I completely agree, and I completely understand that. And I always find it interesting because as founders, I guess getting an award is also a great way to have a bit of recognition for what you're doing, especially being in the space that you're in and getting an award from the industry as well. So that must have been a wonderful feeling. Yeah. And what does that look like for you all moving forward after receiving such a recognition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, first of all, it means like afterwards, it's amazing how much this is also recognized in the industry. Yeah, so many people reaching out saying, "Hey, congratulations, well done, happy for you, proud for you." So it's cool, and it's of course a motivation to keep on pushing to hopefully go for the next award and even build a better product.
As a founder, sometimes I always feel like you hear people are like, "Oh, this award is like." You shouldn't be chasing awards. You should be chasing or focusing on building the company. So what was it like for you to decide to go for this award? Did you all apply? Was it just a recognition?
I mean, we always apply for awards because also we are in a B2B business, right? And it's all about trust.
Okay.
And where do you get that trust from? You need a lot of signals to build that kind of trust. And to get an award, which is also awarded by a jury and so kind of like by people who know the industry, that helps a lot. And so it's a small part in building that kind of trust. So that's also important reason. One of the reasons besides like that's great motivation for the team to apply for these kind of contests.
Yeah, and have you seen it actually impact your B2B sales and? Like,
I think it's never a direct effect, So it's part of like the whole marketing game, I would say. I mean, for me, trust is a critical factor. You need to build, and it's that's part of it. And you need great references talking about you. You need to work with the right brands. You need to kind of like have the community talk positively about you, and then it starts moving, and you also feel it in sales eventually.
Okay, it's a snowball effect. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear that it's like that in B2B sales as well, because I mean I work in the B2C space, and social proof is a huge factor from whether it's recognitions, whether it's coming from customer reviews and those things. And so hearing that it's very much similar in B2B, you're just getting it from different sources as these awards, recognitions. they give the
Absolutely, yeah. I
certificate.
feel like in B2B, these awards are even more important
Yeah.
than in B2C. That's kind of like my gut feeling,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least. I don't have data for that.
No, but I'm sure there's something to it. So, well, phenomenal. Well, congratulations again, and really excited to have you on this podcast and talk more about minubo.
Super, let's go.
Awesome. I find it interesting your background. So you're not new to the founding game. You've been in the industry for e-commerce for a while. You started off first with MODOMOTO was your first company, and then there you actually was a personal shopping service for men specifically. You managed to scale it to over 100 employees in under 2 years, and then you merged it with your competitor, and then you decided to now join minubo. So I would love to kind of actually go through your founding journey a bit and understand first, did you always want to be a founder? And secondly, why MODOMOTO?
Yeah, I think I kind of always had the idea in mind that I wanted to start something for myself. Was just there. I kind of like freedom is a big value for me, and to create something, to build something, I always liked it. But I always missed kind of like the right network, never had the idea nor money. And that I founded MODOMOTO was, I'd say, more coincidence because my co-founder, I met her when staying in a flat share in my first job, actually,
Yeah.
and we always kind of talked about the idea of starting something, but then, our way parted for a while, and started another job. And at some point, she called and said, like, Andreas, I have this idea about MODOMOTO, and but I need a co-founder. And I said, okay. I mean, I just moved to Hamburg, but you know what? Let's do it. And kind of like jumped into the cold water, and
Okay, that's
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
That's also very open for risk. So what was it specifically about the idea of MODOMOTO that made you say, yeah, you know what? I'll do it.
I personally didn't think so much that it was a big risk because, like, you know, I had no kids. I was just providing for myself. So and I just also saw it as a learning opportunity. I never thought at that moment in time that it could become such a long and also successful journey. I just thought, like, hey, it's an experience. You know, you always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Otherwise, you will regret it, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I jumped. And I like the idea. I mean, MODOMOTO idea is to make sure guys don't need to go shopping anymore. And I personally hate shopping. Still do.
Yeah.
Still a customer at Outfittery.
Okay.
And that was the reason.
That's pretty fair. I'm not a fan of shopping myself either, so I can very much relate to it. And as a founder myself, I can also relate to the mindset of it's not really much of a risk to do this right now. Don't have kids, no major responsibilities. I just have to make for sure I survive. Then it's a lot easier. But what I'm curious about, because you did mention in the very beginning, is that at the time you didn't really have a network, you didn't have the money, these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you were able to grow MODOMOTO, and your co-founder were able to grow MODOMOTO extremely quickly. It eventually merged with Outfittery. You ended up leading a team of over 500 people. So what did this experience really teach you about scaling a company and really getting from 0 to 1?
I think, what did it teach me? I learned that it's tough.
Yeah.
You know, it when you say it like that in 2 or 3 sentences, it looks like, wow, great story. When you live that story, it's also tough and it's challenging, and you need to work a lot, and it's hard, but it's also satisfying at the same time. For me, it taught me that, when you talk about, look at scaling, to scale marketing, to scale budgets, to scale processes, that's easy, yeah? But I think for me, what's the most challenging and most important thing, and what does not scale so easy, is communication, working with people, you know, because especially if you're in a company which grows quickly, you need to adapt all the time. You need to, you know, structure the way you communicate, structure, you have meetings, get new people on board. It's a continuous working effort, and it's difficult to get it right. But in my opinion, it's very, very important, because me personally, I want to work in a company where people are happy, where people are motivated. And it's also, I think culture is a critical success factor. So important to get that right.
Yeah, I think it's important that you bring that up. And I find it fascinating because personally, I've lived that experience as well around communication. One of the biggest learnings for me was always what information goes in someone's head, like what comes out of your mouth and then what they hear and get out of it. And it's an
You might be surprised at some points, right?
Incredibly surprised. So I'm like, where did you get that conclusion from? It's like, but you said, and I'm like, but that's not okay. We're going to have to learn how to change communication, change our culture around asking questions so we get on the same page.
And it's, in my experience, is also repetition. Yeah, just because you said it once doesn't mean that it's stuck.
Yes, 100%. And something that I find that's very similar to that is data. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're communicating with someone, you're essentially translating verbally data from you to another person for them to then use that information for whatever they need. And so what I found interesting about our pre-call was you also described data as always a pain topic in e-commerce, even for yourself. With building your last company, you even said at MODOMOTO, you had a team of 10 data scientists, and it never truly felt right when you were looking at the data and working on it. So I'd love to understand a bit more of what did data mean for you in your first company? And then how did that also influence your decision to work on that topic again now as CEO of minubo?
I think data overall, it's a complex topic. And to do it right, you need, as always, if you want to do something good, you need experience. You need to repeat and repeat things in order to really get excellent in it. And at MODOMOTO, I think we had a large team because we saw the value, definitely. And I think we were very good at using data to make decisions, to act on it, analyze it. And I think what was the challenging part was really to provide that kind of data where you can really base your actions on, because in order to do that, you need to get a lot of things right. You need to extract data from the different systems. You need to connect it. You need to model it. You need to make sure it has the right business context. Yeah. So it's not only a technical skill, but it's also a lot of domain expertise needed. You really need to go deep, and that's something what was more challenge. I remember a lot of mornings coming to the company, and we had a meeting, said like, now we need to decide what kind of budget we want to spend on that and that campaign. And I said like, sorry, the cubes, so part of the data structure, were broken. There won't be any data before 12, right? And these things, I'm pretty sure and know that's the issue with many retailers, with many brands, and that's because it's not their focus, right? It's part of what they need to do the actual work, and that's why it often gets second priority.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, and I think that's also why when people talk about data, especially in e-commerce, retail, it always sounds so abstract because there's so much more to it than just the information that you have in a database, but it's making sure that you've got the expertise that can actually understand, absorb that data, making sure that you've got the skills on the team to actually do something with the data that helps an expert or decision maker make the decision. And so when you were looking back at when you were building your first company and that entire scope, which part of that actually felt like it was never quite right? Because I remember you saying it always felt like it wasn't quite right. Was it having the expertise to process the data? Was it the fact that it wasn't core to the business? What would you say?
I think it was really providing that data, right? Making sure you have valid data, because like that's so critical. I mean, you can have like the biggest amount of data. If people do not trust the data, it's all for nothing. Yeah, I think that happens in many companies. They said, I'm not sure if that's right. It says I should go this way, but I go that way because my gut tells me to. So I think to have valid data, to have it reliably every day, as I said, to have that kind of system running, I think that was the main challenge for us. I think, as I said, we were pretty good on acting on it and understanding that, taking actions based on that, but that was also part of our core job, what we did every day.
Yeah,
And the other thing was just a necessity. Very important
yeah.
to take the next step, but not something we had done X times before, right? Just also experience and repetition missed.
Yeah,
Worries.
apologies. Yeah, fair, 100%. And this is also now, which kind of leads me to where you are today. So I find it fascinating because, like you said, building a company, I summarize it in 3 sentences. It sounds phenomenal, sounds great, skyrocketing path. And like you said, building a company is challenging. There's a lot of going on in the process. It's not super easy when you're in it. And so what makes me wonder is after you left Outfittery, after it was MODOMOTO was merged, and then you met your co-founder at Minubo. What made you actually say yes to joining the company, and what about the product convinced you that this is worth spending more time on and being a founder again?
Yeah. I definitely wanted to be a founder, or like at least in kind of like the leadership, because as I said, like I like to drive, I like to build things, and on a specific topic, I just knew from experience that it's so important to tackle this. I knew that there is often not enough time to do this. And I truly loved the idea that there was a team which was laser focused on exactly that topic, providing perfect e-commerce data, right? Because I knew it's a pain point for so many retailers, for so many brands out there.
Yeah.
And but it's a challenging one, and a topic we don't have enough time for quite often. So that made me really go for that. And also personally, I like the idea. I've been in the e-commerce industry for by then more than 10 years, and to stay in the industry, but kind of get a different perspective on things, and that was appealing to me, and I love the team. So for me, team is always a successful factor, and something which is important to me. And they had just a great team, and that package made me jump for it.
Fair. And so for the people listening, how would you describe your company Minubo in 2-3 sentences?
Yeah, Minubo is a group of very smart, very motivated people to make our customers happy, to ensure they have the right data. They are very driven. We are very closely connected, and Hamburg based, but also quite a few people working around Germany.
Yeah. And what is the specific challenge that retailers and e-commerce brands are having when it comes to data specifically that you've seen across clients that you're dealing with? So is it the fact that they've got poor data? They have a lot of it, but maybe it's not great? Or is it the fact that they just have a lot of it, but they don't really know what to do with it? What is the actual problem that they have?
I've seen all of them, actually. So I would say it depends. I mean, what I've seen is a retailer brand who hasn't enough data. So that's a check. There's always data. I mean, mostly starts with that the point that the data is spread across silos. It's everywhere, and you have no single point of truth. Where you can really go to and say like, hey, and everyone in the company go to and say like, hey, when we talk about revenue, we talk about that data point, and everyone talks about the same data point. Yeah. So then you have the starting point to make decisions based on that. So that's often an issue, and then it's often accessibility, right? I mean, like data is worth nothing without action. So and what I see, especially in larger companies, then they have a system or like a structure where you have a BI department, and the teams, maybe they have some simple standard reports they rely on, but as soon as they have like a more detailed question, they want to dive a little bit deeper, then they have to reach out to that BI department. And that BI department has usually a long list of tickets, and you have to line up somewhere in the queue. And that's not helpful if you really want to enable data democracy and speed up decision making, which can create a lot of ROI.
Yeah, of course. And I'm super curious to get into that a bit more, because one of the things that you said and that excited you about your team is that there's a team that's laser focused on particularly the data and providing great data. And you mentioned 2 things in what you said, which is on one hand, not necessarily speaking the same language around the data itself. So one person could call one person's revenues, another person's gross sales after returns. They're not specifically speaking the same language. And then on the other hand, you talked about accessibility. So my question is then, how are companies currently solving this? Then do they see that this is a problem, and how are they solving this?
I think accessibility, I would say a lot of companies see that it's a problem, but it's also often like for a lot of companies, it's also a little bit of mindset issue, because they are reluctant to provide everyone in the company with transparency and data,
So why is that?
I don't know, might be a little bit of trust. Insecurity, I think, but general, I would say that accessibility, that's something which is there's a high problem awareness if that's not there. For data model, so like to have a common language, I think that's actually a topic where the problem awareness wasn't so high so far. The companies were usually trying to, define KPIs for themselves and kind of like taking it step by step by step, which leads often to a situation where you have an inconsistent model and no one knows anymore what's behind which KPI definition and how to calculate it, and like a little bit of chaos. But I think this issue gets increased awareness because of the rise of AI. In order to let your AI work successfully with data, the AI also needs to understand what's the meaning of the data, what's behind. If you have a data point, you need to understand what does it mean,
how's it
right?
defined?
How's it calculated? And so I think that issue gets increased awareness because there's immense need to work with that. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, and I find that quite a complex topic because we've had a few people come on this podcast. I remember one of the most notable ones was Dara Kosik from the German Retail Federation. And one of the things that she was saying is, retailers have to somehow start adopting AI in order to keep on top of their game, to even stay competitive in the market. And right now, especially within Europe, when we look abroad at the US, we're looking at China, they're doing phenomenally in the game and with using AI. But over here, we're not on the same pace. But at the same time, I can also empathize with retailers because it sounds incredibly daunting. You already have your core business that you're dealing with the day-to-day tasks around. And then on top of it, you've got your data, but now somehow bringing that all into one place, defining it properly, understanding the data set, and then being able to give it to an AI of which you probably don't have internal expertise for also sounds extremely daunting. So how is it from your perspective when you are talking to these retailers? What is their perception of using AI to help them process the data? Are they trying to build these things in-house? Have they even started? Are they typically just like, getting stuck because they feel like their data is not good enough? How does that look?
I think there's an enormous range, of retailers which are really at step one of their journey, and others who dived very deep into this topic, or might be even AI first companies. So it's really an extreme range there, right? But of course, you need to make the best use of it, and everyone will start using AI in some way. Like our perspective is, of course, everyone will use AI, but the critical success factor is data, because like AI is extremely powerful, but the outcome can only be as good as the input is, right? So that's something which is really important to have in mind.
And how does one get to having a good set of data? What is a good set of data, actually?
Good question, because like good data, I have good
what does
data.
That mean?
I've got data. Beautiful. Huh?
It's in an Excel sheet. It's defined.
Very structured.
Is that good data? What is good data?
With nice formats, yeah, right.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. So, good question. I don't want to, now take too long
Please
to
do.
define it, but don't get too technical. But I think it's 3 steps which you need to take.
Okay.
It's first you need to integrate and structure the data. So, right, you need to make it consistent. You need to connect it. You need to clean it up. That was always important if you want to do business intelligence.
Yeah.
But now the next level is really to make sure you can take decisions based on that, and also AI can take decisions based on that kind of data. So you need to make sure you have the right metadata in place, meaning it's actually simple, but you need to tell AI that is these are revenues which they find in the data field. So it's called metadata, and you need to provide AI with the right semantic. So you need to explain them, hey, if we talk about average order value, that's how it is defined, and that's especially how it's calculated. And also you need to, if you think about maybe later on about automation, then you need to also let AI know what is actually a good return rate in my case, because that might vary across different businesses quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
So, and then in the third step, you also need to provide AI with the right guardrails. So that's you have that kind of data. If you have to taking the first 2 steps, you already have good data, probably very good data.
Yeah.
But then if you connect it with your LLM, you want ChatGPT to analyze that kind of data, then it's important that you also give the right guardrails. So especially, for example, tell ChatGPT to really calculate everything and not estimate things, to calculate it using Python, and give them quite a bit of guardrail so they can make the right decisions.
Okay, fair. And so I'm thinking to myself from the perspective of maybe like a mid-sized retailer or a retailer who has a bit more resources, I think to myself, okay, you just listed 3 things that I should focus on. First, integrate and structure my data, which pretty much most people should have if they have a business intelligence team. The second part is taking decisions based on the data and providing the right semantics for it. And the third part that you said was providing the right guardrails, especially if you decide on using an LLM like a ChatGPT and things. And so then the question for me is, all right, so then easy. What is the hard part for a retailer to implement this? Can they do it so easily? Can everyone just...
In theory, you can, of course, build everything yourself, right? It's always, I think, a question where you want to put and focus your resources on. It sounds easy in theory, but I think even to the first step to integrate and structure the data, that's already quite a bit of challenging. But if you talk more about the second part, semantics, then you not only need data know-how, but you need a lot of e-commerce, retail know-how. So the connection about it, like how to be. It's like a little bit like creating a new language, right? That's what it is. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be also a system which can grow over time, right? So so like it really needs to be thought through. Otherwise, you create chaos, and and people over time don't know anymore, like how is this KPI calculated, and how does it connect with another one? Can I connect it with that kind of attribute? All these kind of things, and especially if you want to work with AI in the next step, you need to make sure it's accurate, because you want accurate answers. So in theory, you can do it yourself, but you need to invest a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, and you need to do it consistently over time, because it's a never-ending story. Your data model will grow.
Boy, that sounds like a lot of work. That sounds actually incredibly tasking to do, and also it makes me wonder about the amount of human error that could potentially go into it, especially, like you said, if there's one point of data that's quote unquote bad, the output is then also incorrect. And so I can imagine that there's a lot of human error that could easily happen if a company's doing it without the right expertise on board, is what I would imagine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And so then I also wonder, back from your cases, then, have you been able to identify, for example, how it's actually helped companies to become more profitable or even better in their decision making or even more efficient? In what ways have you seen that happen?
Yeah, quite a bit of ways. I think one simple example, which doesn't even involve AI so far, is a simple one, right? We had a retailer who started working with us, and he was selling products on marketplaces, and he was quite convinced that everything was great, profitable overall on marketplace business, profitable on every single marketplace, profitable in every category he was selling.
Yeah.
But like when he started using Minubo, he like drilled a little bit deeper, right? And then he realized he was also selling shorts, and realized, okay, there's a particular article which like is actually bestseller. He thought was one of his best articles, but it was costing him quite a bit of money every time he shipped that article. And so how did he realize that? Because like now he could easily access all kind of data, not only sales, but like get the full drill down on profitability, you know, so including gross margin, transactional cost, marketing costs, everything was really detailed and exactly connected with the single article. And now he could see, okay, the overall category was perfectly profitable.
Yeah.
But when I just stop selling this article, I'll be even more profitable. And it's two things which I think kind of made the change here. First was all kind of data was integrated, every single cost item. Yeah, because that's often difficult because certain items cost data is in different systems, and then you look at one system, you only say revenue, and then do you kind of like over the thumb calculation, but you know, it's okay in general, but not perfect. And second of all was that he could easily identify also a single article, because like especially if you sell thousands of SKUs. You sometimes lose track, and if you get an alert, then it's something different.
Yeah, and actually makes me think about what you said in the very beginning with when you have a company with different departments and the data is living in those different departments, you probably are never having a good, clear overview of exactly what's going on. So how common would you actually say is the outcome for someone, like the outcome similar to that of the client that you had? Because I would imagine it's actually quite frequent then.
It's quite frequent, of course. So if you don't have like a full data infrastructure in place, then there's a lot of potential and potential to unlock, I would say, definitely.
What does the future of retail and e-commerce look like then in your mind, now that there's a huge amount of data, there's a great way to centralize it? It's going to increase decision making a lot moving forward. So how do you think that's going to affect the future?
Yeah, future e-commerce, a big topic. I mean, like in our small world, definitely what I absolutely love that data is getting so easily accessible. I mean, I personally loved it, and I'm still amazed when I just connect our data with an LLM. And then at my fingertip, I get all the answers I want from revenue. Then you drill down, you ask questions, you ask for recommendation. And of course, like you need to be a little bit awake and double check things at time. But it's amazing. These are questions and insights I would have needed a whole BI team to figure it out. And now I have it within minutes and can do big analysis, get small insights, and that's possible for everyone. So, and that's possible for every kind of company size, for every person working there. So you get a whole new level of decision-making, transparency, and also speed. So I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see where it goes.
And there's kind of two ways I want to continue from here, because one thing that popped into my mind was what you said in the very beginning was currently way decisions were being made is you're getting your data from different sources, you're trying your best to put it together. Maybe they're using Excel sheets or whatever dashboard the BI team is potentially having, and then a good portion of it is guesstimating, gut feeling. How much gut feeling now is still in the decision making then? Or how much experience also comes in decision making? Because what I wonder is experience comes from the time spent. Like for you being in the industry for 10 years, I don't know if you can necessarily impart that knowledge into an LLM. So how much does you getting the feedback of all the data that you've gotten about a particular situation influence the gut feeling or your past experience and knowledge for you making your final decision?
I think, there are two aspects to it when I think of it. So, I mean, like if it's your sort of larger decisions, I think I would always look at the data. But if it's some more strategic, long-term decisions to think about, and I think there are so many things to factor in, right, which can't be in the data. Then of course gut feeling and experience is also part of the equation, for sure. And second of all, what I think also, if the LLM AI provides me with a certain answer, I think gut feeling and wake mind to double check things if does not feel right, it's still important, right? Because AI eventually it's not a deterministic technology. So you ask 3 times the same question, you don't necessarily get 3 times exactly the same answer. It's a probabilistic model. So it's good to double check, and if your gut tells you that can't be right, and especially if you're a founder yourself, then you kind of like, you really live that business, you are into it, and then you feel like, hey, let's check, that sounds too good to be true. Let's double check that.
We'll try that again. And actually I think this is a phenomenal point, and you actually already hinted at something, because at the e-commerce Berlin Expo, you did run a bit of a live test around AI, and you gave it the same question, same data set, and it gave you 3 different answers from ChatGPT. So what actually happened in that moment, and what did the room make of that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I loved that masterclass because everyone was so alert, so interested. So I've done masterclasses before where it wasn't necessarily the same, but you could really, really sense that this topic is so important for everyone, and everyone is still learning so much. I mean, everything happens so fast, so everyone was really into it, really trying to understand things, really alert. It was a great atmosphere.
And what do you think that the room really took away from that experiment? Was it the knowledge to double check and check your gut feeling and your experience, or what was it that they really took away from being able to do such an experiment? Because I get the impression, backstory for it, I'm getting the impression that a lot of people are starting to take LLMs and the results for gold. Like, if it gives me the result, it must be true, and that's the only truth. So the fact that you ran this experiment with the room and it gave them different results, how do you think that they interpreted that?
I hope they interpreted it in a way that they understood that good data, we spoke about what that means, is critical to get the right answers. And just don't put anything into your LLM. Your LLM need context. It's also like if you use it in everyday life. If you do not give enough context what your question is about, then you get an answer, but maybe it's not right. Yeah,
for sure. And so this is also one of the things that you've said, which is 2/3 of AI projects fail not because of the technology, but what we discussed. So quote unquote bad data. And so what does the failure actually look like in practice then for a lot of these organizations?
I mean, eventually it means bad decisions, and bad decisions can cost you a lot of data. I mean, there's recently there was a story trending on Reddit where a retailer was complaining about like how much money they lost, and that he had sleepless nights because he was relying on the data which was provided by his LLM. And I mean, that can happen. It's just technology, and you need to think about, and you need to use it in a smart way, and it's extremely powerful. But you can, especially in retail, where you spend a lot of budgets, when you when you let them forecast your buying volume for the next month, and just buy it, and you're at a certain stage already, then it can be costly, and it can also mean your end if it's not a proper forecast. So that's a risk.
For sure. And I mean, it sounds so much like a double-edged sword. It's one hand, your output is only as good as the input that you've given it. So long as your data is great quality and you've given it great data, it can give you great results. And then at the same time, vice versa, you give it bad data, it's going to give you bad results. And it also makes me wonder, because that also means, what I'm taking from this conversation is that there does need to be human in the loop, and there does need to be a person with expertise in the loop making these decisions as well, or taking the information from these LLMs and AI agents, whatever's giving the data back, to make the decision. Because at the end of the day, AI can only put out, or like your LLM can only put out data that's as good as the information that's been received. So that's kind of the conclusion that I'm getting to from what you've said, actually. And so what I wonder is, when you were looking at companies who are really looking to making this data transition to really be able to feel more empowered with making sure that they've got great data to make these great decisions, how would you suggest they get started?
So I'd say, if you want to tackle a problem where you don't have like much expertise in, then I'd say it's quite simple. Get some support, right? Talk to people who've been in the same shoes, and learn from their experience. I think that's a great way to start. And always, it's not like it's only, I need good data. Ask yourself why, right? What's your use cases? What do you want to actually solve? Maybe you can also start small for whatever you need, and it's not a huge, project, because I think people always also like to say like, "Ooh, I don't want to, get into this. If you start with project, then we will be stuck forever."
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like this. So, think about your use cases, get some support, and then take it from there.
Wonderful. I think those are really wonderful, great takeaways. And so with that being said, how could others get in touch with you, learn more about what you're building, and potentially learn more about getting better data?
Just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest way to reach out, and we'll be happy to connect.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining. It was really a pleasure, and sharing all of these great insights. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Pleasure. Thanks for listening to Behind the Click. If you enjoyed this episode, follow the podcast and leave us a review. It really helps others discover these stories and helps us to notify you when the next episode goes live. Also, remember to join us at E-commerce Berlin Expo in February to keep the conversation going. We look forward to seeing you there, and until next time.